You'll recall that on our first live stream, we set kind of a basis, an illustration that we're going to continue to use every time we talk about the internet. And that is that the internet is just like a highway, right? It's just like a highway. It's something that you can travel on. It takes you from where you are to another destination, a place that you want to be, a business, a shopping center, the post office, different things like that. So if the internet is just like a highway, well, of course, a website is just a location that highway could take you to, right? We talked about on our first live stream how this is the case. There's all sorts of shopping that you can do online. That's why we've got so many options there on the screen. That's often what we spend the bulk of our time doing on the internet, right? The websites that we visit, they're typically a place for us to shop, right? That's just one of the most common uses for websites. But there's all sorts of different things that are on the internet. There's libraries, there's entertainment, all sorts of different kinds of websites. We're not really limited, but that essentially the storefront, you could say, is the website. Some websites are really beautifully designed. We'll talk about some examples later. If you think back in the early days of the internet, maybe when you were using those AOL discs that we talked about, some of the websites were pretty chaotic. It was hard to figure out what was going on, what the information was. And so we'll look at some modern examples that kind of have a lot of those elements. But our purpose is to be able to get to any website and navigate safely. So we'll look at a lot of the common features of websites. But it is frustrating when we're on a website, we can't really figure out what we're doing. It does give you that feeling, maybe like being lost in a store. Maybe you have this memory. This is something I've got in the archives way back in my mind, and I bet you do too. If you were ever at a store with a parent, maybe your mom, you're in the checkout, and just as they start scanning your groceries, what would your mom say? Hey, could you go get this one thing that I forgot? And you start looking around and you're like, sure, mom, I'll do it. And you get lost, you get turned around, you feel that pressure. Or worse, the reverse, when your mom would say, just stay here with the cart while the person is scanning and I'll go back and get something, right? It kind of feels that way when we're online, we're on a website, and we just can't figure out what's going on. So understanding the basic elements of how websites are laid out can help us to avoid that feeling, and we'll feel confident. So if you recall, every business, of course, has an address. Therefore, every website has an address. And we talked about this in our first stream, the URL, Uniform Resource Locator. Again, you don't need to memorize that term. That is just the web address, the website's address. There's those things you see there at the bottom. So www.google.com, that whole thing is a web address. That domain, we talked about that both yesterday and in our email live stream, how important the accurate spelling is on that. We'll get into that a little bit more today as well. But you want to keep that in mind. You want an accurate URL. Spell it correctly, because if you misspell it, of course, you're going to run into a problem. You'll arrive at the wrong destination. So how do we get to a website? There is only one single way to get to any website, and it is not teleportation. We have to use a web browser. You'll recall, if our device is like the car that we drive on the highway, right? That's our phone, that's our tablet, that's our laptop, our TV, our refrigerator in some cases, right? They all are the devices that we use to navigate on the internet. Well, our web browser is much like the windshield of the vehicle that we're navigating on. And of course, we spend a good amount of time talking about this on our first live stream, but let's just hit it again, because it's really important to remember how to navigate a web browser. So we talked about these 6 elements. Number 1, which was the navigation pane. That means you can go backwards if you've made a mistake. Remember, if you've made a mistake, you really haven't. Just press back. Go back to the previous page. You're not lost. Nothing has happened. Just use the navigation on your web browser to go back. The second thing we see there is the reload button. If the page opens up and it doesn't populate what you're looking for accurately, if the images are missing or it gives you one of those error messages, you just use reload. Now, number 3, of course, was the open a new tab. Now that is both a blessing and a curse. Let's just take a second. Let's look at a web browser for just a second. We're going to use Google Chrome for this example. So here we are on our Google Chrome, and you'll notice, I'll just throw my mouse up there. Can you see right there? Actually, let me make that a little smaller for myself. Right here, that plus sign, right? That's a cue for us. Open a new tab, right? That's what that does. So you notice we've got a new tab open. We can open another one and another one and another one. In fact, you can open up hundreds and hundreds of tabs. We had someone confess in the chat the other day. We're not going to ask them to confess today, but someone confessed to having over 120 tabs open on their web browser. That's a bit of a blessing, right? You can keep a lot of websites open for yourself, so it's easy to find them. We'll talk about a secret way to do that later. But it can also be confusing. You always want to look at the top to make sure that you are on the site that you intend to be on. So we'll look at some examples of that. So that was the number 3 on our list here. Number 4 is the address bar. That's like our GPS. That's where we type in the website that we're looking for. We want to be accurate. Of course, we've got number 5, which is our sizing for the web browser. So we can jump back to Google Chrome for just a second. I'll give you an example of this. You'll notice right now on our navigation pane, we've got our minimize line, right, which will make it disappear, but it didn't really go anywhere. You can't see it right now, but I know that it's still there at the bottom. I just look for my Google Chrome logo and it's there. I just click on it and it comes back. But also we've got the maximize, right? It's a square right now, but you'll notice if I click on it, do you see how it changed? Remember how we talked about it'll change when you click on it? So right now it's maximized. And so it gives us a different option. If we want to make it smaller, now we've got those 2 squares. It looks like we're going to make one of those cubes, right? And so this makes it smaller, right? So you see how it transforms itself when you click on it. And then lastly, of course, we've got the X, which would close it, but we don't want to do that. We want to keep it open. Those are the elements of the web browser. That is how we navigate, right? That's how we navigate around our websites. So again, keep in mind that browser is a very, very useful and important thing, extremely important. But this brings us to another point that I know everyone has been waiting, because I brought it up on the first live stream and it's finally time to talk about it. What is the difference between a website and an app? I know it's a big topic. We're going to try and make it as simple as possible. I cannot promise that it will be easy to understand this first go, but I'm going to make it as simple as possible. So I am looking for your feedback in the chat. If you notice that this is not making sense for you, or you feel that it is too complex of an explanation, just tell me. I'll try to simplify it even further. So, a website. We have established one of the key facts about a website is that you can only access it via a web browser. And we went through the list of those web browsers: Google Chrome, Firefox. If you use iPhone or any Apple product, it comes with Safari as a web browser. There's Opera, there's all these different options, but they all have those same features we just reviewed on Google Chrome, right? The navigation, reload, the address bar, the sizing options. Every single web browser has those capabilities. That is the only way to access a website. There's no other option. And it has an address, right? Like we saw in our previous example, google.com, that is the URL, the web address. And so you use that browser to navigate yourself to that website. Now, an application is something different. You install an app on a device, right? You download it. You go to whatever the appropriate store is for the device that you're using. So if you're using a Android based device, then you would go to the Google Play Store. If you're using an Apple based device, then you would go to the I think they just call it the App Store now for Apple. If you're using an Amazon based product, of course, Amazon has their own application store. So you download the application to your phone, and it works in a way that's very different than the way the website works, because the website, of course, you can go to multiple different sites all at once, but on the application, you can only access that single bit of information. It's the same information that you would see on the website. For example, if like some of you right now, you may be watching on an application, you may be on your phone, right? You may be on your TV, you may be on your laptop using an application, but you could also be watching this exact same live stream, seeing the exact same information on a website using a browser, right? Again, on your phone, on your TV, or on your computer. It's just up to you. So the only difference is how you access the information. A website is accessed by means of a browser. An application is downloaded onto the device that you're using. If you're watching this and this is after the live stream, you're watching it weeks or months down the road. If that's not clear to you, let me know in the comments. It's perfectly fine. I will respond to you in the comments. Or again, you can go to the website and let us know, hey, I need a deeper explanation. We also will have resources on our website where you'll be able to read these explanations at your own pace. So you'll have all those things available to you.